Welcome to the Anarcha Archive. I'm J.C. Hallman. Today, we're going to back up just a little bit and talk about a frequently overlooked portion of the story of Anarcha and the diabolical surgeon J. Marion Sims.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
To be clear, this video series is about Anarcha, the most consequential of the experimental subjects of the so-called father of gynecology, J. Marion Sims. In 2015, I found the first evidence of Anarcha's life that did not come from Sims' own writings, and a couple of years later, I set out on a quest to discover what kind of life she lived. This video series is about her, but another part of the story is about Sims. And sometimes understanding Sims is a way of understanding what happened to Anarcha and why it happened. That's what we're talking about today. The jury is not really out about J. Marion Sims. He was a jerk. Believe it or not, that's not an exaggeration. Sims' biographer, who was definitely a Sims supporter, admitted that Sims was a peevish and puerile man. Another champion of Sims openly admitted that he was an unadulterated jerk. But how did he get that way? And does it have anything to do with what happened to Anarcha? Well, Sims would seem to have been born a jerk. But some experiences around the time we've been looking at in recent videos do shed light on what happened to Anarcha, or at least on how he went about using her story, very much in the same way he used her body for surgical experimentation, after he falsely claimed to have cured her. Other writers have taken notice of the fact that Sims once claimed to have been good friends with P.T. Barnum. Barnum was a promoter of sideshow acts and an inveterate showman. In fact, he's considered the model of all showmen today. Everyone, including Sims, who later gets called a showman, gets compared to P.T. Barnum. And Sims actually knew him. It's worth dwelling for a moment on how P.T. Barnum became a showman. Originally, Barnum made a living owning grocery stores, and later dabbling in running lotteries. When the state of Connecticut outlawed lotteries, Barnum had to start looking for a new hustle. He found Joyce Heth, a very old enslaved woman. She was so old, in fact, that the man who owned her was claiming to anyone who would listen that she was 161 years old and that she had acted as a nurse to George Washington when he was a young boy. Joyce Heth is how Barnum got his start as a promoter of the weird and unbelievable. He thought he could do better with Heth than the man who originally owned her, so he paid $1,000 to officially become her and enslave her, and he showed her all across the country. He quickly made a fortune. Barnum knew Joyce Heth was not 161 years old, and he knew what to do when doctors in New York started to publicly claim that she couldn't be more than 80. He turned her into a spectacle. When Joyce Heth died, as Barnum surely knew she would, he staged an elaborate public autopsy, charging fees for people to attend. Later, he denied that she was dead at all, and generated more publicity that way. All of this happened in the 1830s, well before Sims would encounter Anarcha and begin the Alabama fistula experiments. But you see the parallel, right? Both Barnum and Sims would establish their reputations with a story they fabricated around the body of an enslaved woman. Okay, now recall that Sims cured Anarcha in 1849, and he published his first account of the fistula experiments, first began telling the story of Anarcha 3 years later, in 1852. Sims first met P.T. Barnum right inside that 3-year window between his so-called cure of Anarcha and the moment he staked his entire career on her story. Here's what happened. In 1850, Barnum arranged to manage the American tour of a famous Swedish singer, Jenny Lind. They started in New York, traveled down the East Coast, played Cuba, and then sailed for New Orleans. That's where Sims was waiting. Sims claimed that his wife had insisted that they attend the Jenny Lind concert in New Orleans. In fact, Sims arranged to stay at the same hotel where Barnum and Lind were staying. Raise your hand if you think that's an accident. To make it a little clearer, Sims was already summering in New York at this time, frequently, in fact. And the New York world was very well acquainted with the story of P.T. Barnum and Joyce Heth. Now, a few years later, Sims was about to stake his entire career on a fanciful, in fact, false, story about the body of an enslaved woman. And he just happened to meet Barnum in a hotel lobby in New Orleans. Sims knew what he was doing. The same kinds of biographers who celebrated him even when they knew he was a jerk noted that Sims was a mover and a shaker, an upward climber. And that's exactly what he was doing here. And this begins to explain what happened to Anarcha. Not only was she never cured, Sims was using her, following the lead of P.T. Barnum, to climb the social ladder to establish himself in New York City. That's why he could never have it discovered that she was never truly cured. Next time, we'll begin to dive into the stories of Anarcha's pregnancies and begin to ask whether she had any children who lived into adulthood.
Whoa, whoa.